she whispered. "I'm not the girl you were supposed to meet." The CEO just smiled, and that blind date changed 3 lives forever. The scent of burnt sugar lingered in Haley Monroe's apron as she scrubbed the counters of her nearly empty bakery. Flour still clung to the edge of her golden bangs, and her fingers were sore from another failed day of sales. Outside, dust crept in like a quiet reminder. Rent was due in 3 days. Her phone buzzed on the windowsill. "Emergency. Call me now." Sighing, Haley wiped her hands and tapped the call icon. "What is it this time?" she asked, already bracing for a favor she did not want to grant. "I need you to do something for me." Hannah's voice was brisk, impatient. "There's a date tonight. Very exclusive. Nathan Prescott. You've heard of him?" "No," Haley replied, brushing a strand of flour-dusted hair from her cheek. "CEO of Prescott Ventures, billionaire widower. Anyway, I got scheduled with him through the agency, but a better opportunity just popped up. An oil magnate's son. Same time. So, I need you to go in my place." "Absolutely not," Haley said quickly. "You want me to pretend to be you? That's ridiculous. Just sit there, smile. Don't say anything stupid. He probably won't even show up with a kid anyway." Haley's brows drew together. "Kid?" "Yeah, he has a daughter. But you won't need to worry. Just be presentable. I bake cakes, Hannah. I do not go on fake dates with billionaires." Hannah's voice dropped an octave. "Haley, you owe me. I gave up college for you after Dad left. That's not true, and you know it." "Don't care," Hannah snapped. "You owe me your whole youth. 1 date isn't too much to ask." Haley's chest tightened. She looked around the quiet bakery, at the empty tables, at the cracked tile she had no money to fix. Maybe she did owe the world something. "Fine," she murmured. "But I'm not lying for you. If he asks, I'll tell the truth. Just don't mess it up," Hannah hissed before ending the call. The restaurant was sleek and bathed in gold light. Too expensive, too quiet, and filled with polished people Haley would never fit in with. She stood awkwardly at the entrance, smoothing down her dress. It was the only one she owned that could pass as formal, a soft navy blue wrap with buttons that never quite lined up. Then she saw him. Nathan Prescott. He walked in with measured steps, wearing a charcoal suit like it was stitched from quiet power. But what drew Haley's eyes was not the man. It was the little girl holding his hand. The girl, no older than 4, had big brown eyes and tight curls. Her gaze swept the room, never lingering too long, but her grip on Nathan's hand was firm. Haley's heart sank. This was beyond awkward. Nathan approached the reserved table, looked around, and checked his watch. Then his eyes landed on her. She stepped forward, hesitating. "Mr. Prescott?" He straightened. "Yes?" "I believe I'm here for the dinner," she said, her voice quiet. "But I should probably tell you something before we sit." His eyes scanned her, confusion first, then cautious curiosity. "Go on." "I'm not the girl you were supposed to meet," she said, hands clutched in front of her, voice barely a whisper. There was a pause, a full, still pause. Then he smiled. Not the polite corporate smile she expected, but something softer, smaller. "I guess I met the right one," he replied calmly, his voice rich and even. His gaze didn't waver from her face. Haley blinked. "You're not upset?" "I came here because my assistant begged me to give dating one more try," he said, pulling out a chair for her. "And because my daughter wanted to see the aquarium next door. I wasn't expecting anything." The little girl climbed into her seat without a word, her eyes still on Haley. Haley sat down slowly, unsure of what exactly she had agreed to. Nathan adjusted his sleeves. "So, what should I call you?" She looked at him, the golden light catching in her hair. "Haley. My name's Haley." "Nice to meet you, Haley," he said with a small nod. And the dinner began. Haley wasn't used to places with tablecloths this smooth or silverware this heavy. She sat stiffly across from Nathan, eyes flicking down to the menu she could barely pronounce. Her dress felt too tight at the shoulders and too loose at the waist. She tugged at it discreetly. Nathan, meanwhile, was composed, watchful. He barely looked at the menu, instead cutting his steak with practiced ease. Ellie sat beside him, quiet, a tiny figure in a floral dress, hands folded neatly in her lap. Haley stole a glance at the girl, then back at Nathan. "I'm sorry," she said. "I've never really done this kind of thing." "Blind dates?" Nathan asked. Haley chuckled nervously. "No, fancy dinners where I'm not also the waitress." A smile ghosted across his lips. "You're doing fine." Ellie peeked up from her plate, her eyes wide and curious. Haley tried not to fidget. She reached for her water, then stopped as a server arrived with the children's meal, chicken fingers and fruit slices. Ellie didn't touch it. Nathan gently nudged the plate toward her. "Try a bite, sweetheart." Ellie looked away. Haley leaned forward slightly. "Mind if I try something?" Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead." She picked up a small grape from the edge of the plate and held it between her fingers. "This one looks like it has a secret," she said playfully. "Want to guess what it is?" Ellie glanced at her. Haley made the grape hop across the table with her fingers. "It says, 'I bet you can't catch me.'" A faint, surprised smile touched the corner of Ellie's mouth. Haley gently nudged the grape onto Ellie's plate. "Your move!" Nathan watched, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. They ate in relative silence, but the tension was different now, less rigid. Haley helped pour juice into Ellie's cup, wiped a small spill without fuss, and coaxed a tiny nod from the girl with a quiet, "Thank you," whispered just loud enough to be heard. Time slipped by until Haley checked her watch and sighed softly. "I should probably go. Long day at the bakery tomorrow." Nathan looked up. "Of course. Let me get the bill." But before she could rise, a small hand reached out and caught hers. Haley froze. She looked down. Ellie was holding her hand, not just touching it, gripping it firmly, intentionally. Haley blinked, her heart stilled. Nathan stared, stunned. "Ellie?" The little girl looked up at Haley, then back at her father, as if daring them to react. "She's never done that," Nathan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not with anyone." Haley didn't move. "Should I?" "No." Nathan stood slowly. "You shouldn't go. Not yet." They walked to the small park across the street, the autumn air crisp and gentle. Haley strolled between Nathan and Ellie, who now held her hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. Nathan watched them quietly, one hand in his coat pocket, the other carrying Ellie's tiny sweater just in case. "I don't usually bring her to these things," he admitted. Haley glanced at him. "Why today?" "Because I didn't want to come," he said simply. "And I figured if it went badly, she'd be a good excuse to leave early." Haley smiled. "Well, looks like your plan backfired." Nathan looked down at Ellie, who was now swinging their clasped hands gently back and forth. "For once," he said softly, "I don't mind." The girl who never reached for anyone was holding on tight. And Haley, for reasons she didn't fully understand yet, didn't want to let go. Nathan found the drawing in Ellie's backpack 2 days after the dinner, folded into quarters and a little smudged with crayon dust. It showed 3 stick figures, one tall man, one small girl with curly hair, and one woman with bright yellow hair and a blue dress. Above them was a crooked sun, and below, in Ellie's blocky handwriting, was the name Haley. He stood still for a moment in his office, fingers tightening slightly around the paper. Later that afternoon, Haley heard a knock on the bakery door just as she was flipping the sign to closed. A delivery man stood there with a bouquet of cheerful yellow daisies and a note tied around the stems with soft twine. It read, "Ellie says, hi, N." She stood at the counter for a long time after the door closed, staring at the card. Their meetings were never formally arranged, but they kept happening, at the park, outside Haley's bakery, once even at the small bookstore where Haley volunteered to read stories to children once a month. Ellie was always with them, and always different when Haley was near. She smiled more, touched things, explored the world instead of hiding behind her father's leg. And Nathan, he started talking more. Not just small talk, but real conversation about the company he ran, about the wife who left too suddenly and too loudly, about the daughter who went silent the day after, and about how strange it felt to see her come back to life slowly, carefully, because of a stranger in a navy blue dress. One rainy afternoon, Nathan brought Ellie to the bakery after closing. "She's been asking if she can help," he said, shrugging off his coat. Haley beamed. "I could use an extra set of hands." She handed Ellie a small apron and guided her to the mixing bowl. Together they made cinnamon rolls. Sticky fingers, flour on the floor, sugar clinging to smiles. Haley had never laughed so freely. Nathan leaned on the counter, watching, more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. When the first tray went into the oven, Haley offered Ellie a spoon to lick. The girl smiled, a wide, genuine, gap-toothed grin, and then, so softly it nearly disappeared in the whir of the mixer, she whispered, "Yummy." Haley froze. Nathan's eyes snapped to his daughter. "Ellie." She looked up at him, her smile still wide. "Yummy," she said again, clearer this time. Haley's hand flew to her mouth. Nathan reached across the counter and gently touched his daughter's hand. "You did it," he whispered. Ellie giggled and reached for Haley. The next morning, Haley opened her bakery to find an envelope taped to the back door. Inside was a receipt from her flour supplier, paid in full. Several large bags of imported pastry flour were scheduled to arrive that afternoon. She stood there, stunned, eyes scanning the invoice, her stomach twisting. She waited until mid-afternoon to call. "Nathan Prescott," he answered. "Did you pay for my flour?" Silence. "Yes," he said. She huffed. "Are you trying to buy my affection?" "No," he replied evenly. "I'm trying to make sure you don't give up your dream over a few bags of dough." Haley bit her lip. "That's not your responsibility." He exhaled. "Maybe not, but Ellie believes in you, and that's enough for me." There was a long pause on the line. Then Haley whispered, "Thank you." She didn't say anything more, but that night she drew a new label for her cinnamon roll display. It read, "Ellie's favorite." The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm neither of them had planned, but both had come to quietly cherish. Haley began stopping by Nathan's house a few evenings a week, not as a babysitter, not as a date, but as something gentler, unnamed. They didn't label it. They didn't need to. Ellie would always light up when Haley arrived, pulling her into the kitchen to show her new drawings or asking for help making cookies. Nathan would stand nearby, arms crossed, observing their quiet connection grow deeper and stronger with each visit. They rarely made plans, but she always came. One evening, Haley arrived with a small paper bag of cupcakes, each topped with a swirl of pink buttercream. "For Ellie," she said, setting them on the counter. "She's upstairs drawing," Nathan replied, "but she'll be thrilled." Haley smiled, her gaze lingering on the staircase. "She's doing better." "She is," Nathan said softly. "And it's because of you." Haley shook her head. "No, she's healing because she's brave." Nathan watched her carefully. "She's not the only one." Later that evening, after Ellie had fallen asleep in the next room, crayon still in hand, blanket half kicked off, Haley and Nathan sat in the quiet living room, the soft ticking of the old wall clock filling the silence. Nathan leaned back in the chair, swirling tea in his mug. "That first night," he said, eyes distant, "when you told me you weren't the girl I was supposed to meet, I keep thinking, what if I had walked away?" Haley looked down at her hands, then back at him with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Then maybe Ellie would still be silent," she said softly, "and I'd still be baking for strangers who don't remember my name." He didn't respond right away. He just looked at her like he was seeing something he hadn't before. "Can I ask something personal?" he said after a moment. Haley nodded. "You mentioned you gave up college for your sister." She nodded again, slower this time. She was always the golden one. Straight A's, perfect smile, big dreams. Our dad left when we were teenagers, and Mom fell apart. I took whatever job I could to keep things going. I worked nights so she could keep her scholarships. Nathan's jaw tightened slightly. "She tells people she built her life on hard work," Haley added with a small shrug, "but I was the one behind the curtain, making sure the light stayed on." He looked at her, really looked at her, and she couldn't quite read his expression. Then, with quiet certainty, he said, "I'm glad you were the wrong girl." A few days later, as Haley cleaned up in the bakery after closing, Nathan stopped by with Ellie. The little girl rushed in and opened her backpack. "I made something." Haley knelt down. "Let me see, sweetheart." Ellie unfolded a new drawing, 3 figures inside a bakery. Nathan holding an ice cream scoop, Ellie in a frilly apron, and Haley gently wiping flour off Nathan's cheek with a cloth. Tears stung the back of Haley's eyes. "You even drew the counter, right?" she whispered. Ellie nodded. "It's us." Nathan stayed quiet, watching the exchange with something soft in his expression. He didn't say a word, but later that night, sitting alone in his car outside a quiet boardroom meeting, he pulled the drawing from his coat pocket. He stared at it for a long time. No gold frames, no designer dresses, just a scoop of ice cream, a messy kitchen, and the woman who had taught his daughter how to smile again. He folded the picture carefully and tucked it back into his wallet, where he'd keep it close always. This part of the story had no shouting, no broken promises, just the kind of honesty that builds something real. A man learning to feel again, a woman learning to believe she mattered, and a little girl whose first word might just change everything. The door to the bakery jingled open, and Haley glanced up from behind the counter. Hannah. She entered like a storm, wearing lipstick. Her designer coat fitted perfectly to her slender frame. It looked absurdly out of place amidst the warm scent of vanilla and the faint hum of the old refrigerator. Her heels clicked too sharply against the cracked tile floor, a sound that echoed like judgment in the quiet space. She didn't bother taking off her sunglasses. Still smells like burnt sugar and desperation, she sneered, flicking imaginary lint from her cashmere sleeve. Haley straightened, wiping her hands on her flour-dusted apron. "What do you want?" "Oh, just checking in on my dear little sister," Hannah said with mock sweetness. "You've been visible lately." Haley frowned. "Visible?" Hannah pulled out her phone and scrolled with perfectly manicured fingers. Tagged in photos at that art fundraiser, the park picnic, ice cream shop, all with a certain Mr. Prescott and his daughter. Charming. Haley's stomach turned. She didn't reply. Hannah looked up, eyes sharp and cold. "You do realize he was my setup, right?" "You canceled," Haley replied evenly. "You asked me to go in your place." "I didn't ask you to steal him," Hannah snapped, voice rising. "I didn't steal anyone," Haley said quietly. Hannah took a step forward, the ice in her tone thickening. "What's your endgame, Haley? Going to sleep your way into a mansion? Use that little mute girl to get sympathy points? Is that it?" The words hit like stones. Haley felt her throat tighten, but she didn't flinch. "I gave up everything," she said, voice low but steady, "so you could chase the life you wanted. And now that I have a little happiness, you still want to take it?" Hannah scoffed. "You think this is happiness? Baking for crumbs in a cracked-floor dump while playing pretend mommy?" Haley's jaw clenched, but she didn't move. "I didn't plan any of this. I didn't scheme. I was just there. And maybe for once I was seen." Hannah's expression twisted. "You were always meant to be the side character," she spat. "Stay in the background where you belong." Then she turned and left, the door slamming shut behind her. That night, Haley couldn't sleep. She stayed behind long after closing, the bakery dim except for the glow of a single lamp above the counter. She stood still, staring at the small glass vase where Ellie had once carefully placed a daisy. The petals had dried, curling inward like whispers. Next to it, taped to the wall, was a faded drawing, Ellie's messy sketch of the three of them baking cupcakes together. Nathan smiling, Haley with a bowl of frosting, Ellie in the middle, arms raised like a tiny chef. Hannah's words echoed again. You were always meant to be the side character. Was she? She didn't grow up attending charity galas. She didn't know which fork to use at a formal dinner or how to make polite small talk at business events. Nathan belonged to a world where money flowed like wine. And Ellie, sweet, fragile Ellie, deserved someone secure, someone with more to offer than flour and borrowed dreams. Maybe this had been a mistake from the beginning. By sunrise, her decision was made. She picked up her phone and typed a message. "Dean need to focus on the bakery for the holidays. Things are getting busy. Thank you for everything." She didn't mention Hannah, didn't explain, just disappeared into frosting and silence. Nathan replied a few hours later. He understood. "Take care." That was all. A week passed. No more flour deliveries, no sweet notes, no surprise visits, and Ellie stopped asking to go to the bakery. She grew quiet again, not in tantrum or resistance, but in that hollow way only a grieving child can. She pushed her food around on her plate, stopped coloring, no longer giggled during bedtime stories. One night, Nathan walked past her room and noticed the wall above her desk was bare. The family drawing was gone. He opened the drawer and found it there, folded tightly, shoved deep in the back corner like a secret no one was allowed to see. He stared at it, his heart heavy. She missed Haley. So did he. But neither of them said it out loud. The bakery had never felt this quiet. The hum of the fridge, the ticking of the clock, the faint crackle of the oven cooling down. Haley heard it all. Every sound louder than usual, as if the silence was trying to fill the void Ellie used to occupy. Haley moved slowly, wiping the same spot on the counter for the third time, even though it was already clean. The holiday orders were coming in, but her hands didn't move with the same joy. Her laughter hadn't rung through the bakery in days. Her chest ached with something unspoken. She had sent the message, she had made the choice. But every minute that passed since, she wondered if it had been the right one. Across town, Nathan was feeling the absence too, more deeply than he'd expected. It started with Ellie refusing her favorite breakfast, then skipping her bedtime stories. She stopped asking when they'd go to the bakery again. She didn't mention cupcakes or Haley or anything sweet. The crayons stayed untouched. One night, Nathan came home late from work, tired and ready to shut off his mind, only to find Ellie curled up on the couch, hugging the pink apron Haley had once tied around her. "She forgot it," she whispered. "I just wanted to hold it." Nathan sat down beside her, brushing a hand over her hair. "Do you miss her?" Ellie didn't answer. She didn't need to. Later, he walked into her room and noticed the wall above her little desk was bare. The family drawing of him, Ellie, and Haley baking together was gone. He opened the drawer and found it tucked at the back, folded tightly. When he opened it, he saw something that stopped his breath. The picture had been torn once, but now it was carefully taped back together, each rip mended with short strips of clear tape, pressed down with small, determined hands. She had fixed it because she couldn't bear it broken. The bell above the bakery door rang the next evening. Haley looked up, her hands covered in flour, expecting a late customer. Her heart skipped. Nathan stood there, holding the folded drawing in his hand. He looked uncertain, so unlike his usual self. He walked slowly to the counter and didn't say a word, just placed the picture between them, face up. Haley stared. The drawing, the same one Ellie had given her, now whole again, repaired with clumsy tape, but full of meaning. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for it. "You kept this?" "Ellie did," Nathan said quietly. "She folded it when you stopped coming. I found it in her drawer." Haley swallowed. "She taped it." He nodded. "She said it was broken, and she wanted it back." Haley looked down at the picture again. The simple lines, the crayons, the joy on their faces captured by a child who had barely spoken for over a year. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to break anything." "I know," Nathan said. There was a beat of silence. Then he continued, voice thick with honesty. "Ellie fixed it. Not just the picture. She fixed something in me, too, but only when you were here." He looked at her, not blinking. "She doesn't need the perfect person. She just needs you." Haley's chest tightened. She blinked, eyes shining now. Nathan's voice dropped. "And honestly, so do I." Haley didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her fingers closed around the edges of the drawing, gently smoothing out a wrinkle near Ellie's smile. The bakery, the cupcakes, the warmth. It was all there, drawn with love, built with time. Something in her softened. The doubt, the guilt, the fear of not being enough. They didn't vanish, but they loosened their grip. When she finally looked up, her eyes weren't afraid anymore. They were clear. They were home. The late afternoon sun bathed the garden in a soft golden glow as paper lanterns swayed gently in the breeze. It wasn't a grand venue, just the backyard of Nathan's house, strung with lights and laughter. But to Ellie, it was a kingdom made just for her. Pink balloons shaped like hearts danced above the dessert table, and a small banner that read, "Happy Birthday, Ellie," hung crookedly above the fence, clearly written in Nathan's handwriting. Guests from Nathan's company mingled politely, but it was clear the event was for Ellie. There were no speeches, no suits, just kids, cookies, and carefully planned joy. And Haley, she stood near the lemonade table, wearing a soft blue dress, simple and light. Her hair was half up, tucked back with a clip shaped like a whisk. Ellie's birthday gift from last year. It had been weeks since she'd been in their lives. She wasn't sure if she belonged anymore. But when Nathan had called, he didn't hesitate. Ellie's birthday, just a small gathering, come as her friend. She'd agreed, though they both knew it meant more. Now, standing with a cup in her hand and a heart beating too fast, Haley scanned the yard. Children ran with frosting-stained fingers, and Nathan stood by the grill, watching Ellie as she hovered over a picnic table. The little girl was wearing a tiny white apron and concentrating fiercely on something behind her back. When she saw Haley, she lit up, not with a yell or a run, but with a slow, glowing smile that made Haley's breath catch. Ellie walked toward her carefully, holding a small cake, slightly lopsided, the frosting a little too thick in some places, but perfect in its imperfection. Haley knelt to her level. "You made this?" Ellie nodded solemnly. "With Daddy," she whispered. Haley smiled, touched. "It's beautiful, Ellie." Ellie handed it over, her fingers sticky with frosting. "For you?" Haley took it, tears already threatening. "Thank you, sweetheart." Nathan approached then, hands in his pockets, a quiet smile playing at his lips. "She insisted," he said softly. "Said it was your cake, not hers." Haley blinked. "She really made this?" She picked every sprinkle. They stood together for a moment, watching Ellie skip off to rejoin her friends. Haley clutched the cake like it was the most precious thing she'd ever held. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon and guests gathered for the final song and candle blowout, Nathan stepped forward with Ellie in his arms. "She wants you to cut the cake," he said gently, handing Haley a knife. Everyone circled around the table. Haley leaned in, starting to slice carefully into the big birthday cake. That was when she heard it. A small hiccup, a tremble. Then, "Mommy!" The knife paused midair. The world froze. Gasps echoed softly around the backyard, but Nathan didn't move. His entire body tensed as he looked down at his daughter. Ellie was crying, not loudly but with fat, quiet tears rolling down her cheeks. Her arms reached out for Haley. "Mommy!" she repeated, voice clearer this time. "Don't go!" Haley dropped the knife, her heart breaking. She knelt right there on the grass and opened her arms. Ellie ran into them like she had always belonged there. "I'm not your mommy, sweet girl," Haley whispered into the child's curls, voice thick with emotion. "But if you need me to be, I will." Nathan turned away briefly, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Around them, no one said a word. It wasn't about a party anymore. It wasn't about birthdays or cake or decor. It was about a girl who had been silent for too long and the woman who had helped her find her voice again. Ellie clung to Haley, and Haley rocked her gently, murmuring soft reassurances only the little girl could hear. Nathan stepped forward after a long moment, crouching beside them. "Ellie doesn't say things she doesn't mean," he said softly. Haley looked up at him, eyes red but filled with something new, acceptance, wholeness, and love. She nodded. "I know." The day after Ellie's birthday, the bell above the bakery door jingled softly. Haley turned, wiping her hands on her apron. "Back for more cupcakes?" Nathan smiled, holding Ellie's hand. "Actually, we were hoping to use your kitchen." Haley blinked. "Use it?" Ellie grinned, eyes bright. "We want to bake something special." Nathan nodded. "Just one cake, our recipe, our mess." Haley laughed softly and stepped aside. "Be my guest." They spent the afternoon dusted in flour and laughter. Nathan cracked the eggs too hard. Ellie dumped in too much vanilla. The batter sloshed over the edge of the mixing bowl, and somehow frosting ended up on Nathan's tie. But Haley didn't care. She hadn't smiled this freely in years. Later that evening, when the cake had cooled and the bakery was quiet, Nathan slid a plate across the counter. "Tell us what you think," he said. Haley picked up the fork and cut a slice, but as the cake gave way, something clinked against the plate. She paused. Nestled between layers of chocolate sponge and buttercream was a tiny velvet box. Her breath caught. She lifted it slowly, fingers trembling, and opened the lid. Inside was one simple, stunning ring. When she looked up, Nathan was already on one knee. Ellie stood beside him, holding his hand tightly. "We both want you to stay," Nathan said, his voice warm and steady. "Not for a day, but forever." Tears filled Haley's eyes. She nodded, unable to speak, and pulled them both into a trembling embrace. A few weeks later, the bakery smelled of cinnamon and celebration. String lights danced across the ceiling, and the closed sign had been replaced with another, "Ah, today we bake for love." The wedding was small, just close friends, a few neighbors, and the soft hum of joy in every corner. Ellie stood proudly in her white dress, holding a tiny bouquet, her curls bouncing with every excited step. Nathan wore no tie this time, just a smile that never left his face, and Haley, in a pale cream dress dusted with lace, looked like someone who had finally come home. The ceremony took place in the very spot where they first shared coffee and awkward conversation. And when Nathan slipped the ring on her finger, he whispered, "Still glad you were the wrong girl." Later, flour flew as all three of them gathered behind the counter to bake the first cake of their new life. Ellie squealed as icing landed on her nose. Haley wiped chocolate from Nathan's cheek with a dish towel, and laughter, real, full, unburdened laughter, filled the little bakery. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, a family made from sugar, second chances, and a love that had no recipe but rose beautifully. Anyway, thank you for watching this tender journey of healing, second chances, and the unexpected family that found each other. If this story touched your heart, imagine the many more waiting to be told. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness and Love Tales for more emotional stories where love breaks through barriers and kindness transforms lives. Tap the bell icon so you never miss a tale that could warm your heart or bring joyful tears to your eyes, because here, every story reminds us, love always finds a way. See you in the next tale.